Learning an American English accent involves focusing on pronunciation, intonation, rhythm, and the unique characteristics of American English. Mike's journey to master the American accent. Mike, a 25-year-old software engineer from Mumbai, India, had always dreamed of working for a tech giant in the United States. His technical skills were top-notch, but he often felt held back during client meetings due to his thick accent. He realized that mastering the American accent and improving his spoken English would boost his confidence and make him a more effective communicator. Mike began by surrounding himself with the sounds of the American accent. He subscribed to podcasts like This American Life and The Daily and watched popular shows like Friends and Breaking Bad with subtitles. He paid close attention to the way native speakers pronounced vowels and stressed certain syllables. One evening, while watching a YouTube video about flapping, where butter sounds like buttier, Mike practiced saying the word aloud. His roommate burst into laughter, but Mike just smiled. Every stumble was a step forward. Mike learned that mimicry was an effective way to train his tongue and muscles. He began shadowing dialogues from movies, pausing and repeating lines until his intonation matched that of the actors. He downloaded speech apps like Elsa Speak and HelloTalk to get real-time feedback. One day, Mike surprised his friends by ordering coffee at a cafe with an impeccable American accent. The barista even complimented him on his clear pronunciation. Mike knew he needed expert advice, so he enrolled in an online course focused on accent reduction. His instructor, Lisa, taught him about key differences like the rhotic R sound and the importance of reducing syllable stress in certain words. Mike practiced phrases like, "How are you?" until they sounded natural. Lisa also encouraged him to record himself daily, comparing his speech to native examples. To gain confidence in real-world conversations, Mike joined online meetups for English learners. He connected with people from around the world, discussing topics like technology, culture, and food. His American accent improved gradually, and he began receiving compliments from his peers. Mike also started volunteering to lead presentations at work, practicing extensively beforehand. Each presentation became smoother, and his confidence soared. After a year of consistent effort, Mike had his first major breakthrough. During a virtual interview with a US-based tech company, the recruiter complimented him on his communication skills. Mike landed the job, proving to himself that persistence and practice pay off. As Mike prepared to move to the US, he reflected on his journey. What began as a challenge had become a passion. He realized that learning an accent wasn't just about sounding like a native speaker. It was about building bridges and sharing his ideas with clarity and confidence. When Mike first began, he was overwhelmed by how different the American accent was from what he was used to. The rolling RS, the distinct stress patterns, and even simple phrases like water or schedule sounded foreign to him. He often felt self-conscious about making mistakes, especially when his colleagues chuckled at his mispronunciations. One of the lowest points came during an important video conference with a US-based client. Mike had to present a project update, but his anxiety about his accent made him stumble over words. Though his technical content was solid, he sensed that the client was struggling to follow him. That day, Mike resolved to work harder on his communication skills. Mike's next step was exploring different tools and techniques. YouTube and podcasts. Mike discovered content creators who specialized in accent training. Channels like Rachel's English and English Addict with Mr. Steve became his go-to resources. He found their breakdowns of common American sounds, like the difference between can and can't, to be incredibly helpful. Mirror practice. Mike started practicing in front of a mirror, focusing on how his mouth moved when he spoke. He realized that forming certain sounds required him to adjust his tongue position, a small but vital change. Recording himself, Mike recorded his voice daily, reading passages from books or narrating his thoughts. At first, he cringed listening to himself, but over time he began to notice improvements. Virtual reality practice. Mike stumbled upon an app that simulated real-life conversations in virtual reality. He practiced ordering food, asking for directions, and even participating in mock interviews, all while receiving feedback from the app. One day, Mike decided to test his progress by calling a customer service hotline in the US. He needed assistance with a subscription he had purchased. To his surprise, the representative understood him perfectly without asking him to repeat himself. That small victory boosted his confidence immensely. Mike also joined a local speaking club called Global Voices, where people from various countries practiced English together. He quickly became a favorite member of the group, not just because of his improving accent, but also because of his humor and storytelling skills. Mike struggled with words that had silent letters, like night, salmon, and honest. One day during a practice session, he said, Salmon, instead of salmon. His online language partner laughed and corrected him, explaining the rule. Determined to master these tricky words, Mike created a list of common words with silent letters and practiced them religiously. He even wrote quirky sentences to remember the pronunciations, like honest nights eat salmon. As Mike improved his accent, he also immersed himself in American culture to understand idioms, slang, and expressions. For example, he learned that phrases like, "What's up?" were often just casual greetings and not literal questions. He even celebrated his first Halloween with his speaking club, dressing up as a cowboy and practicing his howdy. After landing his dream job, Mike prepared to move to San Francisco. On his first day at the new office, he introduced himself confidently, saying, "Hi, I'm Mike. Nice to meet you all." His colleagues were impressed by his fluency and even commented on how clear and natural his accent sounded. Inspired by his own journey, Mike decided to help others. He started a blog called Accent Adventures where he shared tips, personal anecdotes, and resources for learning the American accent. His story resonated with thousands of readers, many of whom reached out to thank him for his guidance. Years later, Mike stood on a stage at an international conference, addressing an audience of thousands. His voice was clear, his words confident, and his accent flawless. As he spoke, he reflected on how far he'd come, from nervous practice sessions in his bedroom to becoming a global communicator. Though Mike had made significant strides, there was still one challenge that weighed heavily on him: the naturalness of his speech. In his new role in San Francisco, Mike was invited to participate in a team brainstorming session. The team was discussing new features for an app, and the conversation was fast-paced and filled with slang. As Mike shared his ideas, he realized that even though he had mastered the pronunciation of words, he still sometimes struggled with blending his thoughts seamlessly into casual, rapid conversation. At one point, he hesitated when trying to say, "I think that feature would be a great addition." He stammered, unsure of how to blend the sounds smoothly. His colleagues, accustomed to quick thinking and witty remarks, looked at him with mild curiosity. Mike immediately felt his confidence wane. Later, alone in his apartment, he replayed the meeting in his mind. "Why does it still feel so hard?" he thought. "I've worked so hard on my accent. Why can't I just speak as fluidly as they do?" That night, Mike sought advice from Lisa, his accent coach. She reminded him that mastering an accent wasn't just about pronunciation. It was about rhythm, pacing, and comfort with the language in everyday contexts. "Don't focus on perfection," Lisa advised. "Focus on flow." The following weeks, Mike honed in on a new aspect of speech: intonation, the rise and fall of the voice. In American English, intonation plays a crucial role in conveying emotion, enthusiasm, and emphasis. He found that this was something he hadn't paid enough attention to in his earlier practice. He began listening more intently to the way American speakers use tone to show interest, excitement, or curiosity. He mimicked not just the pronunciation of words, but the natural ebb and flow of conversations. For example, when someone says, "You really think so?" they often raise their pitch on "really" and emphasize it with a shift in volume. This simple shift was something Mike had missed in his early training. One breakthrough moment came during a team-building event at work. The company had arranged an afternoon of outdoor activities, and Mike was tasked with leading a small group in a problem-solving challenge. As his group worked through the task, Mike found himself naturally engaging in conversation, using casual phrases like, "That sounds like a plan," and "Let's wrap this up." His colleagues responded positively, even laughing at his attempts at humor. In that moment, Mike realized that his language skills had become more intuitive. He wasn't just thinking about the right way to pronounce words anymore. He was thinking in English, responding fluidly, and participating in the rhythm of the conversation. As Mike's American accent and speaking confidence improved, he began to engage more socially, not just professionally. He joined weekend meetups and began making friends outside of work. At a game night, one of his friends complimented him, saying, "Mike, your accent sounds so smooth. You've got that American vibe going on." While Mike appreciated the compliment, he realized that his goal had shifted. It wasn't about mimicking a perfect American accent anymore. It was about feeling authentic in his communication. He had moved beyond imitation and was starting to express himself naturally, without second-guessing every word. Mike found that his new social confidence also helped him grow professionally. He began contributing more in meetings, asking questions, and offering ideas without hesitation. His team began to rely on his insights, and his ability to communicate clearly and effectively gave him a new sense of respect in the workplace. While Mike's linguistic skills were flourishing, he had to continue adapting to American culture. For instance, he learned that in American workplaces, it's common to engage in small talk before getting into the serious business, something he had to get used to. His Indian upbringing had focused more on getting straight to the point, but in the US, casual chats about the weather, sports, or weekend plans were often seen as a sign of building rapport. One day, Mike was caught off guard when his American colleague asked, "So, what did you get up to this weekend?" Mike froze, not sure how to respond. I was just working," he said, trying to be honest but realizing that his answer sounded too formal. His colleague laughed and said, "Yeah, I've had my share of weekend work too, but I bet you did something fun after." "Everyone does around here." Mike began to understand that small talk wasn't just about filling silence. It was about showing interest in people's lives outside of work. He learned how to engage in lighthearted conversations, starting with simple comments like, "I tried an amazing new burger place this weekend," or "I'm learning how to surf, and I finally caught a wave." 2 years into his journey in the US, Mike had become a confident speaker with an American accent that felt more like his own than a learned skill. He had integrated so many aspects of the culture and language that his communication had become second nature. One day, during a team meeting, his boss, Sarah, paused after Mike's presentation and said, "Mike, I just want to say, your communication skills have improved so much since you first joined. You've come a long way." Mike smiled, grateful for the acknowledgement, but deep down, he knew that the biggest reward was the journey itself. Mike had not only learned to speak with an American accent, he had learned to speak with confidence, authenticity, and ease. And in doing so, he had opened doors, formed connections, and discovered a new sense of self. Years later, Mike became a mentor at his company, guiding new international employees through their own journeys of language and cultural adjustment. He frequently shared his story with others, emphasizing that mastering an accent or language isn't just about getting the pronunciation right. It's about becoming comfortable in your own voice. In a seminar with new hires, Mike concluded, "It's not about sounding like a native speaker. It's about speaking your truth, clearly, confidently, and authentically." While Mike's ability to speak with an American accent had become a source of pride and confidence, he realized that true mastery of language went beyond mere pronunciation. It was about communication in its entirety: tone, body language, humor, and the nuances of understanding others. He began to focus on the subtle but essential aspects of language that made him a truly effective communicator. One thing he noticed was how humor played such an important role in American interactions. His colleagues often joked around, using sarcasm and self-deprecating humor. Mike, coming from a culture where humor was more formal and indirect, felt a little out of place at first. But he was determined to adapt. To learn more about American humor, Mike started listening to comedy specials by famous comedians like John Mulaney, Ali Wong, and Dave Chappelle. He paid attention to their timing, delivery, and the use of sarcasm. Mike noticed that the humor often involved quick wit and an understanding of pop culture references. He learned that sarcasm was a big part of American humor, but also understood that it could be tricky. Too much sarcasm could sound rude or confusing to someone who wasn't familiar with it. At work, Mike practiced incorporating humor into his interactions. Initially, it felt awkward, like he was forcing it, but over time, he became more comfortable with it. He started making playful comments like, "Well, that's one way to make a coffee spill look like an artistic statement." Or, "I think I need a second cup of coffee to understand that math problem." His colleagues began to enjoy his jokes, and Mike felt more connected to them. What was once a barrier now became a bridge, as humor allowed him to bond with his team in a way that words alone couldn't. Another area where Mike grew was understanding American cultural expectations, particularly in leadership. At work, Mike had been tasked with leading a small team of engineers for a new project. This was his first real experience with leadership in a new culture. In India, leadership was often seen as authoritative, with respect for hierarchy playing a key role in decision-making. But in the US, Mike noticed that leadership could often be more collaborative and democratic. His colleagues were comfortable challenging ideas, offering feedback, and even questioning decisions openly. At first, Mike felt a bit insecure. He was used to being the one who followed instructions, and he wasn't sure how to approach leading a team when everyone seemed to have an opinion. But he gradually realized that leadership in the US was about empowering others to speak up and share their ideas. He encouraged open discussions in team meetings and began to see the value in collective problem-solving. One day, during a brainstorming session, a junior engineer suggested a solution that seemed a little offbeat. Mike didn't hesitate to give it a chance. To his surprise, the idea led to a breakthrough that saved the project time and resources. Mike realized that true leadership wasn't about having all the answers. It was about listening, being open to new ideas, and guiding the team toward shared goals. As Mike continued to evolve in his language skills and leadership abilities, he began reflecting on how his identity had changed. At first, his focus had been on mastering the American accent and integrating into a new culture. But now, Mike saw that his own cultural background was something to be proud of, not something to hide. He became more comfortable in his skin, understanding that his unique perspective, shaped by his Indian roots, was a valuable asset. During an international conference, Mike gave a presentation on how cross-cultural teams could enhance innovation. He shared stories of how his Indian background had shaped his approach to problem-solving, highlighting the importance of both tradition and innovation in his work. The audience responded positively, and one of the attendees later told him, "Your perspective is refreshing. It's rare to hear someone blend cultures so seamlessly." This moment reinforced something Mike had realized on his journey. He didn't have to abandon his heritage to succeed in a new culture. In fact, his experiences had enriched his understanding of language and communication. Inspired by his own experiences, Mike began to give back to the community. He started mentoring young immigrants and international students who were learning English and adapting to life in the US. Through workshops and one-on-one coaching, Mike helped others navigate the challenges he once faced. He shared his story about how he had gone from struggling with pronunciation to confidently leading a team. He taught his students not just how to speak with an American accent, but how to embrace the language in all its forms, whether it was through humor, cultural understanding, or professional communication. One of his students, a young woman from Brazil named Mariana, was struggling with confidence in her English. "I'm afraid people won't take me seriously because of my accent," she confessed. Mike smiled and replied, "Your accent is part of who you are. Don't see it as a barrier, use it as a tool. People are more interested in what you say than how you say it. And if you speak with confidence, your ideas will be heard, no matter the accent." Mariana's eyes lit up. "I never thought about it that way." Mike's guidance helped her gain more confidence, and soon she was presenting her ideas in meetings with clarity and poise. Several years later, Mike's journey came full circle. He was now a respected leader in his company, admired not only for his technical skills but also for his communication prowess. He had been invited to speak at a prestigious tech conference in New York, sharing insights on the intersection of cultural diversity and innovation. As he stood before a packed auditorium, Mike paused and reflected. He had come a long way from the nervous young man who first arrived in the US with a thick accent and self-doubt. He had mastered the American accent, but more importantly, he had embraced who he was, an individual who had merged his cultural roots with a new identity, creating a unique voice in the world. As he began his speech, he smiled and said, "Language is more than just words. It's about connection, understanding, and growth. I've learned that speaking with confidence doesn't mean speaking without an accent. It means speaking from the heart. Wherever you come from." The room erupted in applause, and Mike knew that, at last, he had found his true voice, one that was uniquely his, shaped by both his past and present. As Mike's role expanded, so did his responsibilities. No longer just a team leader, he was now managing cross-functional teams, engineers, designers, and marketers, all working on different projects. This new challenge required him to not only master communication but also to adapt his leadership style to different working environments. One challenge that Mike encountered was in managing people from diverse cultural backgrounds. He quickly learned that while American culture emphasized individualism and personal responsibility, his team members came from places where collaboration and collectivism were more important. During one particularly difficult project, Mike's team had hit a series of roadblocks. The engineers were frustrated because the design team kept changing the requirements, while the designers felt like they weren't getting enough technical feedback. Mike called a meeting to address the tension, but he realized that he needed to adjust his communication. Rather than give a lecture or try to fix things immediately, he invited everyone to share their thoughts openly, making sure that each team member had the space to voice their concerns. He asked one simple question: what do we all need from each other to succeed? The room went quiet for a moment. Then one engineer spoke up: "We need clearer communication from the design team." Another designer chimed in: "And we need more technical guidance to ensure we're designing within constraints." By framing the conversation as a collaborative effort rather than an issue of blame, Mike helped his team come together. They found common ground, clarified expectations, and devised a plan to move forward together. Through this experience, Mike learned that leadership wasn't just about managing tasks or achieving goals. It was about fostering an environment where open communication, understanding, and mutual respect could thrive. As Mike's own journey came full circle, he became even more passionate about mentorship. He realized that a big part of his success had come from the guidance and advice he received from others, whether it was his accent coach, Lisa, or the supportive colleagues who helped him grow professionally. Mike began mentoring younger engineers at his company, offering advice not just on technical skills, but also on navigating the intricacies of communication in a diverse workplace. One of his mentors, Ahmed, a recent graduate from Egypt, struggled with confidence in his English. Although his technical knowledge was strong, Ahmed often held back during meetings because he was unsure of how he sounded. One day, Mike sat down with Ahmed after a meeting. Mike said, "Your ideas are really good. The team just doesn't hear them because you hesitate too much. You've got to believe in your voice." Over the next few weeks, Mike worked with Ahmed on his public speaking skills, giving him small assignments like sharing an update in team meetings or explaining a concept during brainstorming sessions. At first, Ahmed's nervousness was palpable, but with Mike's encouragement, he began to gain confidence. He started using his voice to share insights, no longer afraid of his accent. Slowly but surely, Ahmed's ideas began to stand out, and his colleagues started to listen with more respect and attention. One day, after a particularly successful meeting, Ahmed thanked Mike. "I couldn't have done it without you," he said. "You showed me that it's not the accent that matters. It's the clarity of the message." Despite all of his success, Mike still sometimes faced moments of self-doubt. He had come so far, but there were times when he felt like an outsider, particularly in larger meetings with senior executives. He would sometimes catch himself thinking, "Do I really belong here?" One day, during an important meeting with top-level managers, Mike was presenting a new project proposal. As he spoke, he could feel the pressure mounting. The executives, all seasoned professionals, were asking tough questions, and Mike struggled to keep up with their quick-fire responses. Later, when the meeting was over, Mike found himself feeling deflated. He walked back to his office, replaying every moment in his head. "Did I sound okay? Did I miss something? Maybe I'm not cut out for this." He reached out to his mentor, Lisa, to discuss his feelings of imposter syndrome. She shared a piece of advice that stuck with him: Imposter syndrome is something everyone feels at some point. Mike, it's not about whether you belong. It's about whether you are willing to learn and grow. That conversation changed Mike's perspective. He realized that he wasn't expected to have all the answers or to be perfect. He was simply expected to show up, be prepared, and keep growing. He understood that leadership wasn't just about technical knowledge. It was also about resilience and the ability to adapt to new challenges. With his growing responsibilities, Mike found himself stretched thin. Balancing his work life with personal commitments had become increasingly difficult, and he realized that he needed to pay more attention to his well-being. He had always been an early riser, using his mornings for exercise. But lately, his work had taken over, and he'd been sacrificing his personal time. Mike decided to reprioritize and started setting aside time for himself every day. He began taking weekend hikes in the nearby mountains, something that helped him clear his mind. He reconnected with old friends and family back home in India, keeping in touch regularly via video calls. Mike also began meditating, something he had heard about from colleagues but never truly tried. He discovered that even 10 minutes a day of mindfulness helped him stay centered and focused, both at work and in his personal life. One quiet evening, as Mike walked through the streets of San Francisco, he reflected on how far he had come. The city had once felt overwhelming, but now it felt like home. He had built a career, a network, and a life that was shaped by his unique experiences. His American accent was now second nature, but what mattered more was how he had transformed his communication into a tool for connection. He had embraced his heritage, built meaningful relationships, and used his voice, both literally and figuratively, to impact the world around him. Mike's journey had taught him that success wasn't just about perfecting a skill or achieving a goal. It was about resilience, continuous learning, and staying true to who you are. As he looked toward the future, Mike knew that his journey was far from over. There would always be new challenges to face, new people to meet, and new skills to learn. But he was ready, confident in the language he spoke, the leadership he practiced, and the person he had become.